It's 4 minutes after 10, and this is not a conversation about what you want. I think it's important to make that clear, not just to you, but to me as well. It's not a question of what you also be very careful of what you wish for. Johnny's up early this morning. I never thought I'd say this, James, but I'm actually dreading the ultimate demise of the Tory party, but only because I see what the replacement looks like. Open racism, far-right hate, zero checks and balances. The trajectory, of course, paved by the said Tory party. So that's a sort of timely reminder of being careful what you wish for. But there are a couple of things going on at the moment that make it a moment in which I think it is pertinent to wonder whether or not they are facing an existential crisis. I don't remember the last time it happened. It looked for a while like the SDP were going to do terminal damage to the Labour Party, not least because three of the biggest Labour beasts were in the original Gang of Four that set the party up. I mean, popular legend has it that the invasion of the Falkland Islands by Argentina changed the electoral calculus completely because the sugar rush of patriotic fervour that it delivered to Margaret Thatcher and her extremely robust handling of the situation changed the polling, changed the popularity contest that politics often is completely. But they kind of knocked at the door. The Liberals were overtaken by Labour, weren't they, in the early parts of the 20th century? What had been the Whigs, the Tories and the Whigs had been the two big beasts of British politics for generations, and then things changed, largely, I think, because of representation of working people and the rise of the trade union movement, the Labour Party in its infancy being essentially the political wing of the trade union movement. I'm going to start with a quote written by the two senior correspondents at the Beeb in the politics department. And they quote I think a shadow cabinet minister. Yes, it is, a shadow cabinet minister. Could this be like the 1920s where the Liberals got overtaken by Labour? This time, of course, it would be the Conservative Party being overtaken by Reform. And it's very weird. It's one of the reasons why I want to talk about it. Some people have bothered to run a rule over Farage's economic claims, and he's going to make Liz Truss look like Mark Carney. There's no surprise there, right? Of course he's going to make Liz Truss look like Mark Carney. He was one of the most prominent political figures to describe Liz Truss as some sort of economic genius before the wheels fell off the UK economy. So what is he going to do but try more of the same? You've seen his hero, Donald Trump, having all manner of problems on the other side of the Atlantic. Today alone, being told by his own federal court, or the United States' own federal court, that his tariff plans are not allowed. But that doesn't seem to matter. Kemi Badenoch is disastrous. 7 months she's been there. She, according to, again, the sources that have spoken to these journalists, is the problem. It's pretty bad, says one Conservative advisor. I don't think you would find many of her supporters at all who would either tell you it's going well or that they expect her to be there at the general election. Now, so far, so normal, right? So far, so ordinary. The Conservatives are ruthless in their defenestration of leaders who the rank and file feel are likely to lead them to electoral oblivion. Selfishness kicks in a way that it doesn't in the Labour Party. The Labour Party keeps dead duck leaders in place for far longer than it should do historically. The Tories move swiftly and they move ruthlessly. Never more so, of course, than when they got rid of Margaret Thatcher. But the calculation is always this: we'll do better with somebody else. Ian Duncan Smith never fought a general election because it became clear to his colleagues that they would do better with somebody else. And I think it is actually that simple, that there's a ruthlessness that kicks in and overshadows almost everything else. Would we do better at the next general election with somebody else? And if the answer to that is yes, then it is sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap time for whoever is in the leader's office at that moment. So far, so ordinary. But what if things don't improve? What if nobody could do a better job? What if something is shifting as a consequence of many factors, some of which I might be able to spot and some of which I won't? I mean, the rise of the online right, which is riddled with lies and misinformation, but unfortunately people who believe lies and misinformation have exactly the same vote that people who don't have. So you can't be sniffy and dismissive of it. It is a democratic cancer, but it is also a collection of valid voters, if you like. So that seems to be the constituency to which people are increasingly appealing, oddly, including sometimes, it seems, the Labour Party. A story today about how immigration reductions in some sectors are going to hit the Treasury quite hard. It's a direct contradiction of what Keir Starmer has claimed. Tax revenue. If there is a reduction in immigrant workers in the engineering and IT sectors, the economy will be harmed and tax revenue will be decreased. This is the government's own immigration advisors telling ministers, contradicting Sir Keir Starmer's claims this month that the sectors had become too reliant on migrants. Anyway, you see who he's appealing to with that kind of comment. So that's when things become really interesting. I want to say something that might strike you as false modesty, but it really isn't. You will be at least, if not more interesting than I am on this subject. Look, some days it's my job to get the ball rolling and to throw some conversational hand grenades into the mix in the hope of shaking you out of your stupor and prompting you to engage with the programme, either directly by ringing in or indirectly by shouting at the radio or having a conversation with me in your own head. But some days I'm groping around in the dark as much as everybody else is. And I'm struck by 2 or 3 things that have happened recently. The first is the move here for a BBC article to quote a shadow cabinet minister contemplating the demise of his own party strikes me as close to unprecedented. I've followed politics on and off since about 1988 when I started studying for my politics A-level, and I can't off the top of my head remember a time when the Conservative Party was being described as facing existential threat by anybody serious, let alone an actual shadow cabinet minister. The second thing is it's weird, isn't it, with Cummings? Because the one thing he'll never do is acknowledge the role he has played in completely kebabbing the Conservative Party, not least by putting Boris Johnson into Downing Street and then clearing the way for Liz Truss to come along and tick any boxes of incompetence and awfulness that Johnson had somehow missed. But Cummings is nothing if not unself-aware. But for somebody like that to talk about, as he did yesterday on Sky News, an event horizon being passed, the possibility that they've got, let's call it the point of no return. The Conservatives have gone past the point of no return. That's 2 things. And the third is the Badenoch problem. She's objectively awful. It's terrible, really. It would be wonderful to see a black woman in particular offering up a brand of popular conservatism that both recognised reality and reflected common decency. You might not like the Tories historically. I don't particularly, but I can point at people I admire who have come through the Tory ranks. It's a bit of an obvious list, probably. Amber Rudd, and I still have to do that little mental check there that I'm not about to mention Amber Heard. I don't know why I've got a mental blockage on those 2 Ambers, but I do. David Gauke, been doing great work in the Justice Department. Of course, Rory Stewart is often your go-to man for decent Tories. And you may disagree with them passionately on many ideological issues, or let alone policy issues, but they are not people who strike you as fundamentally awful, fundamentally incompetent, or fundamentally dishonest. And if the Tory party is to become a fundamentally dishonest movement, then they're trying to eat the same lunch that Nigel Farage has been eating for years. Making promises that can't be kept, demonising foreigners and various vulnerable groups, apple pie tomorrow, mother love today, all of the things that are in the arsenal of the populist in opposition seem to be the things that the Tories are going for today. It's coming up to 14 minutes after 10. And the big stuff happens sometimes without you noticing. You suddenly realise that things don't have to stay the way they have always been. Things don't have to stay the way they have always been. And of course, at the weekend, something we haven't mentioned yet, Boris Johnson sounding out the possibility of a comeback, which tells you that they have learned, or he at least, and his supporters have learned precisely nothing. So I've got two questions for you. The first is the obvious one, and just hit the numbers seriously and tell me what you think and why. Do you think they've passed the point of no return? 0345 6060 973. And remember, I want you to tell me what you honestly think, not what you want to be true. Do you think that the Tories have passed the point of no return? If a shadow cabinet minister is positing that possibility, then there's absolutely no reason not to ask that question today. And then here's the second question. I've got an answer to this one. What would recovery look like? What would resurrection look like? I said to you, about 5 years ago? I said to you that I could conceive of a moment where the Tories campaigned on a return or closer ties with Europe. It was so obvious, so quickly, if not immediately, that Brexit was going to be a disaster, that the only question that hangs over British politics, like a sort of sword of Damocles, is the question of who's going to move, who's going to blink first. Keir Starmer doesn't really blink, does he? He winks. He blinks with one eye and leaves the other one open. So, all this talk of closer ties, a deal that is actually moving very much in the right direction, hopefully a youth mobility scheme kicking in, lots and lots of things going on that constitute closer ties, but not actually close enough. The only circumstances in which I can see the Conservative, and this may be me, maybe time to call the nurse, but the only circumstances in which I can see the Conservatives offering up an electoral package that nobody else is offering. So Labour looking increasingly centre-right, Reform hoovering up the sort of populist lies and lazy jingoism, which is always going to be popular when cost of living is high and people feel unloved. So where on earth do the Conservatives sit? Well, Europe has been the defining issue of the modern Conservative Party since the early 1970s. And may it continue to be so. They'd be the ones that actually hit into closer European. I don't know. So there you go. Those are your two questions. And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. Do you think that the Conservative Party, as a shadow cabinet minister suggests this morning, could be facing the end of the electoral road? Oblivion? Have they passed the point of no return? 0345 6060 973. And if there is a way back for them to relevance, if there is a path back to relevance, what does it look like? What does that path back to relevance look like? And I'll say it again. I don't have anything to say on this that's more interesting than what you say. We are absolutely equal on this because we pay roughly the same amount of attention to what's going on. We inhabit the same universe. We know the same names and the same characters. And here we are.